Hello, everyone. This is our fourth consecutive conversation with the winners and members of the International Committee of the Global Energy Association. Today, we're talking to Dr. Thomas Blees in the United States. Hello, Dr. Blees. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Sergey.
Can I ask you a strange question to begin with? Well,
Sure.
We'll be talking about the future, obviously, and things being nuclear, as you like them. But when was the last time you visited a barber's shop? When was your last haircut?
Does my hair look bad?
It's the same here, you know. We're still talking very peculiar circumstances.
It was February. My wife,
Lockdown, etc.
yeah, my wife is cutting my hair at home.
We're going to be talking about a revolutionary concept of yours. Floating reactors, as they call them. You put nuclear reactors on ships, you transport them wherever, and you feed, especially the developing world countries. But first, I have to clarify one thing. We'll be talking today about your article, which will be published duly on our website. But we're also expecting for the book about the 10 breakthrough ideas for the next 10 years, an article by Tony Ralston from the United Kingdom. We'll be talking about SMR, which is the small modular reactor. Now, SMR. Yours is this SMR.
MSR.
MSR, that's it.
It's an MSR SMR.
Okay.
A small reactor that's a molten salt reactor.
What is molten salt?
Molten salt is basically a combination of various kinds of salts, depending on which design you use. It's like table salt, sodium chloride, and you melt it. It melts at about 300 degrees centigrade. And that becomes your working fluid that transfers the heat from the fission process into a heat exchanger to produce your electricity.
Let me check my notes, because I don't want to be smarter than the scientists. It could be transuranic. It could be thorium. And that's precisely what Tony Ralston speaks of when he talks about SMR. So your MSR is a natural part of the SMR.
It's one SMR. There are several small modular reactor designs. Some are light water reactors, like the kind of reactors we use today. They're just smaller. Some are fast reactors using sodium, and some are molten salt reactors. So Tony's looking at the thorium reactor. Now, some people that have promoted this technology have said, "Oh, thorium is great," you know, and they try to convince formerly anti-nuclear environmentalists that uranium's bad, thorium is good. But in reality, the way thorium works is you put it in the reactor, it gets bombarded with neutrons, it turns into uranium, and then the uranium splits. So it's a bait and switch that I've always thought was a bad idea. You don't want people to think something, you know, uranium is bad, thorium is good, and then they find out later that you were fooling them, right? A thorium reactor runs on uranium too. It's just that the thorium turns into the uranium inside the reactor. And
Sounds very easy. Sounds very easy. The technology is from the 60s, but you yourself in your article, which we are deciphering now, say that unfortunately the designers of these reactor concepts often seemed overly glib about new alloys that were not available in the 60s when the first MSR was built. Are these alloys available now?
Well, there are new alloys, but nobody has, because of the materials challenges here. That was the big question in my mind all the time for the last 10 years when I've been looking at these. You're operating at twice the temperature of a pressurized water reactor. You're in a highly corrosive environment because it's molten salt, and plus you get neutron bombardment, which tends to break down metals. So the question was, you have all these people trying to design a reactor that's going to last 60 to 80 years, and they say, oh, well, the new alloys can do it, but I say that's way too glib because nobody's ever done it. And so I got involved with a small group of people who had realized they were shipbuilders, and they realized that you could build reactors so cheaply using shipyard technologies that you could actually make them disposable after 4 years. And they know they'll last 4 years because we ran one for 4 years. at Oak Ridge National Laboratories where it was invented. And when they came up with this idea and they showed that the economics would still work, making them disposable, that's when I got really interested.
It's good that you mention it now, because in the article by Tony Rolston, there's the thought that, in fact, if you want to reduce costs of nuclear energy, the first thing that you have to reduce is the construction costs, which actually they are about half of about 50% of the price is about construction. So yep. When you take an MSR reactor and put it on a ship, you already save a lot of money.
Oh yeah, a tremendous amount of money. As a matter of fact, they've gotten quotes from established shipyards already where they built ships. So they've got a lot of experience in this. They're accomplished industrialists. And what the conclusion that they had come to originally, and which was verified by the shipyard companies, was that they could build these ships for about $1 per watt, which is $1,000 a kilowatt, which will make it cheaper than any other type of electricity generation.
Let me interrupt you here, and I'll quote you. In your article, you say precisely, that price has been the holy grail of solar panel designers for decades. But unlike solar panels, the power ships would be available 24/7 at full power. Really? I mean, they will be available. This is true. But if we compare the prices, so it's roughly the same, solar energy and nuclear energy.
I'm not sure that solar's gotten down to $1 a watt yet, but even so, you can't really compare solar and nuclear because nuclear is available all the time and solar obviously is not.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to have storage capacity when you have nuclear, you just have the reactor running.
Let's go back now. So your idea is to build MSR reactors massively using new alloys, new technology, save by putting them on ships rather than building stations.
Yeah, also building the reactors in the shipyard, building the entire thing in the shipyard.
And send this ship where?
Fully self-contained power plants on a ship. So you need to put nothing on shore except the wires.
Who will own the ships?
I would guess that the countries or companies that build the ships will retain ownership, because if you would sell the electricity just as if you were a utility company. Okay, so say the Zvezda shipyard outside Vladivostok builds, okay, and they send it down to Indonesia to provide electricity to one of the islands. And they sell electricity for half the average European price of electricity. The ship would pay for itself in a little over a year. And at that point, then Russia becomes a utility company that is just making money, because they're very cheap to run. The cost of fuel is trivial, and also it's very important to understand that basically when you build a power plant, you want to provide sufficient electricity to meet peak demand, okay, the time of day when people are using the most electricity. But peak demand is generally 2 to 3 times average demand. So if you got a power plant that's fine with running at full power 24/7 and it's capable of providing peak demand, that means that you're going to have as much excess energy available as your grid is taking over a course of a 24-hour period. So you can use that excess energy by desalinating water, producing hydrogen, producing ammonia, making synthetic fuels. And so these are much more than electrical plants.
Well, there's one little detail here. You are from the United States, I'm from the Russian Federation. There are 3 more nuclear states: France, the UK, and China.
Mm-hmm.
There are major countries.
South Korea.
Well, hold a sec. There are major countries which do not form part of the non-proliferation treaty. North Korea, India, Pakistan, Israel. Let's put them aside now. It's a big topic. But once you have this floating nuclear reactors all over the world, will there be not a problem with the nuclear proliferation?
On the contrary, there won't be, because in order to operate those power plants, you don't have to transfer nuclear technology to the country that you're producing electricity for. So if Russia produces the ships, they just float the ships down, they operate the ships, they sell the electricity, and no technology is actually transferred. So it's actually safer than going down and building a power plant in a currently non-nuclear country. And in which case you have to be concerned about the political stability of the country and the possibility that a government will take over and that, you know, you'll be kicked out and they'll use the plant for producing weapons material or something.
Because basically you can sail off at any moment.
Yes, exactly.
You just cut the cables connecting you to the shore and off you go.
Yep.
What about the safety of the molten salt technology? I mean, a lot of people who are listening to us now would instantly remember words like Chernobyl in Ukraine, former USSR, of course, and Fukushima in Japan. Is this technology safer?
It's way safer. It's so safe that you don't need any evacuation zones around a power plant, even if the power plant is on shore, because it doesn't operate at under pressure. So there's no chance of it exploding. And even if, in a worst case scenario, you would have a terrorist attack where conventional explosives would be used to blow up an operating power plant. Well, what would happen in that case is that suddenly all this radioactive molten salt would be thrown up into the sky. And but it solidifies at 300 degrees. So it would immediately become solid salt. And the problematic elements of a nuclear accident, iodine-131 and cesium-137, they're chemically bound to the salt. So they're not aerosolized, they wouldn't go up into the atmosphere. And this almost immediately solidified salt would just drop down next to the power plant. Now, whatever dropped on land, if it was like up next to the shore, you could clean up with a robotic vacuum cleaner, basically. And anything that dropped into the water would dilute into the seawater and virtually immediately become diluted and dispersed through the ocean, and it wouldn't make any difference. And people worry about this, but the ocean is full of radioactive material.
Yes, I've seen that line. I don't remember now, but it was in your article or in the article by our friend from England, that you can actually produce uranium out of the seawater.
Yeah. If you extracted the seawater with uranium filters, which a technology that's already available, if you extracted the uranium from that seawater that's cooling your nuclear power plant, you would be producing more uranium than you need to fuel your power plant. So you wouldn't really even need to mine uranium if you use that technology. Nobody's done it because uranium is really cheap, but it's completely doable.
Talking about the prices again, because we've just had a diversion from our conversation. So you think that a network of floating reactors, I call them this way, I invented this expression, you invent your technology, I invent my expressions, floating reactor. So these floating reactors could, in fact, revolutionize energy supply, especially in the developing world.
They will, ultimately. I mean, there are so many tremendous advantages from a safety, from economic standpoint, that once the first one is demonstrated at scale, which can be done in as little as 3.5 to 4 years, then the economics will completely drive it. And they're so fast to build that you can build, just using existing shipyard technology or shipyard capacity around the world, unused shipyard capacity, you could build 400 gigawatts a year, which is the size of the entire world's nuclear fleet right now, which produces about 10% of the world's electricity. So in other words, you put all the shipyards to work full time, and in 10 years, you can have as much electricity running the world as you do now from all sources. You could completely do away with coal, gas, wouldn't matter. Which is another reason why I say The price of petroleum is going to drop. The price of gas is also going to drop.
Well, both Russians and Americans are not interested in maintaining this conversation.
Exactly. But this is a disruptive technology that you can see coming. Okay. And so the first country that recognizes this and acts upon it will be able to lead a transition into this. And for Russia or any country that relies primarily on oil and gas for their foreign income, this is a perfect opportunity.
But then Russia has done something like that. I mean, the barge-mounted reactors, the barge-mounted reactor called Lomonosov is already operating in the far north, at the Chukotka Peninsula. But it's a bit different from what you are describing, isn't it?
It's basically a baby light water reactor. It's the same kind of reactor everybody uses today. But it was really good that Russia did this so that they could pioneer the concept of a floating reactor. These reactors I'm talking about would be major reactors. They would be the size of large power plants, 500 to 1,000 megawatts or even more.
My very last question. I don't really want to reveal everything which is going to be published in your article, which will appear on the website this week, and then in the article by Tony for the book. But there's this big philosophical question. For people like you, for people like me, nuclear technology is something evident. And despite the mishaps that, yes, we have had, but water industry hasn't had its own mishaps. It's the future, obviously. But then maybe we are too knowledgeable. What do you say to a normal, common citizen who is instinctively afraid of nuclear technologies?
Learn about it.
Well, here you are being more enthusiastic than I am, but it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Tom.